Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Back to Basics. I have an exciting guest today. He's Mark Rampolla. He's a visionary entrepreneur, investor, speaker, and writer known for inspiring mission-driven leaders to build businesses that matter and lives of real freedom. As a co-founder and co-managing partner of GroundForce Capital, he helps bold founders scale purpose-driven companies that generate massive impact. Previously, Mark founded ZICO Coconut Water, pioneering the multibillion-dollar coconut water category before selling to Coca-Cola Company and later buying it back. He's the author of 2 books, High Hanging Fruit, a memoir and manifesto on building mission-aligned businesses, and An Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom. Since losing his home in the 2025 Pacific Palisades fires, Mark has been wandering, but not every wanderer is lost. Hello, Mark.
Hi,
Welcome to
Leticia.
Back to Basics.
Very nice to be here. I've really enjoyed getting to listen to your episodes and the other guests you have on. So I'm very honored to be here.
Well, I am too. And I mean, to read the bio of a guest like you, it's like I will be reading for an hour because there's so much that I left out of that deserves to be on that introduction. But I really wanted to make sure that, you are presented like that extremely successful entrepreneur. You saw coconut water when others didn't, and we'll talk about that. And but also creating impact and being yourself impacted by life tragic ironies of losing your home, and for that I'm very sorry,
Thank
and,
you. I
and for
appreciate
everybody in
you.
the same situation. So we'll get to there, but I'm
Yeah.
always excited, as you know, if you listen to the episode about you, the younger Mark. We
Yeah.
already share offline that your family is from Sicily, so you
Yeah.
feel free to entrench that because my audience knows I'm very passionate about my island, as I call it. So tell
Yeah.
us about what you were dreaming about in your younger years. I was a little bit of your family life.
Oh, boy. Yeah. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the youngest of 6 kids. And it was a beautiful upbringing in a wonderful, wonderful family. I think that I've come to realize that being the youngest was very influential on me in 2 ways in particular. One, I got to watch growing up 5 times before I grew up. So I got to see my older siblings get some things right, get some things wrong, and learn, I think, some lessons along the way. And then the other sort of influence for me was I I think I didn't quite feel seen and heard because I felt a little lost, a little forgotten, frankly. My
Mhm.
parents were older. They loved me, of course, but really, by the time you have 6 kids, I think it's like,
I
oh
can
yeah,
imagine.
where's that little one around, right? So it was the beauty of that is I had a lot of freedom. So I got to roam our neighborhood, do pretty much everything I wanted. But I also didn't always have the maybe guidance or direction that might have been helpful at times, you
Mhm,
know. But
mhm,
I have no regrets or no anger or anything towards my parents at all. I think they did the best they could do. But I can see that I've in many ways been striving to, in some ways maybe be seen and heard when I wasn't as a little kid. And that
mm,
self-awareness has been very helpful for me, and it's really at this stage of my journey.
I think I love that because I think people relate like childhood because it's not trauma, it's just a circumstance that is your reality, and that is not a bad thing, but it wasn't necessarily, as you say, a good thing. But by you knowing this is what happened. And also not having anger or anything like that. It's just you use it as a tool. I think we need a lot of that, like that self-awareness of how our early years were and what they create. And I mean, you're Sicilian. I have something similar because I'm the second child and I had an older brother. And of
Mm,
course, the man, my dad being an entrepreneur, every time I wanted to go to the office with him, but guess who was left behind? They would sneak out of my sight, and he would take my brother, but not me.
right.
Ironically enough, now I help run the company, my brother too. But that idea, that fear of missing out, of being left behind, that stuck with me.
Interesting.
To your own self awareness.
Those are
So yeah,
powerful motivators, right? To
yes.
understand ourselves. And I agree with you. I think, I try to look back with curiosity and compassion, not criticism. And at the same time, you mentioned not anger. The one thing I've learned in the last few years is feelings are okay, right? They're just feelings, right? They're just emotions. And so anger can serve a purpose. And so I did go through a phase where I had some anger. That's normal. The
Mm-hmm.
question is, what do you do with it, right? Do you become
Mm-hmm.
trapped in that? Does that become obsessive for you? Or can you be aware of that and still be in choice, around how you want to live your life? And that for me has been liberating. I think I used to think, particularly in my early days as an entrepreneur, like, if I feel this, if I really go into my feelings, I'm dead in the water, right? I might never come out. I don't need them. They're irrelevant for me, right? Stay in my head, solve it, float above all the feelings. And that worked for a while until it didn't, and now
Mm-hmm.
I've come to see a different way.
Well, very interesting. And so you had, sounds to me like a great upbringing, tons of siblings. Uh, so that's always good. I think big families are great. And did you think that you were going to become an entrepreneur? I mean, I know you went into the corporate world. Was that choice easy? I always tried to create like some sort of pathway between a real passion and alignment. I know
Sure.
you're big on alignment. So, uh, trying to give people like this younger audience that sometimes they get pushed towards things that are maybe not in alignment with who they are and their
Right.
passions. So what can you say about those choices you made as a
Yeah.
younger Mark?
Great question. Great question. Well, the simple answer is I had no clue of what really business even was. No one
Mm-hmm.
in my family was in business. My Sicilian grandfather had a restaurant years ago, but that was way before I was alive. And so my father, my mother, siblings, my parents were only children. Nobody was in business, even in business, let alone an entrepreneur. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember back, as best I can tell, the most successful business person I knew in our neighborhood, a very middle class area of Pittsburgh, was the Maxwell House Coffee salesperson, if you remember that brand, for
Yes.
Southwestern Pennsylvania. You know, he was a
Okay.
sales rep. And they had just a little nicer house than us, a little nicer car. And I think, although my family, we were never poor, but there was never excess money with six kids and a single income that my father had. And so, but somehow I did have a desire, I would say, for something different, for something more. I had in some ways an aesthetic that I don't think any of my siblings had. Well, my sister had it. I went into design, but I liked nice things. I liked beautiful cars. There was some drive in me. Maybe in some ways, because I was the youngest kid, I was looking for ways to connect with something. So anyway, when I was young, I thought artist. I might be an artist.
Mm-hmm.
What else was I interested in? At some point, I got interested in high school in physical therapy. Physical therapy. But I'll tell you what, I played a lot of sports. I got injured playing football, and I had a hematoma, kind of from a helmet into the arm. So I had to go to physical therapy to get that broken up. And the physical therapist had a really cute daughter that worked there. That was my
That's
motivation, right?
that's a good
So
motivation.
yeah. So even up until the time I went to college, I just didn't get it. I remember my older brother was working as a salesperson in Compact Computers, one of the early computer companies.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that he got promoted to CFO. And I didn't know what that meant. Right? So
Yeah.
it wasn't until I went to college, I went to a liberal arts college, Marquette University in Wisconsin. And I picked I had this, I had to have some specializations. I was going to do liberal arts, but I was debating about physics. I was good at that, but I picked business. I'm not even sure exactly why. But it wasn't until I got there and started to meet some people from, frankly, entrepreneurial families that I started to get interested in business at all. But at the time, entrepreneurship just seemed weird to me. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't get it. I thought the world was run and the big money and the big power and the big success was in corporations. In fact, I don't think I've even fully realized this until this conversation right now. My family was very Catholic in an activist way, in a beautiful way, like Jesus, was an activist. The meek shall inherit the earth. They protested in our community to, help integrate it in a way. My dad would bring some kids from a local black family with us to a pool that was pretty much segregated at the time. So they were really activists in a way. And I think in our house, big corporations were the bad guys. And so maybe in some ways unconsciously, I thought, well, what's so maybe that's where I want to be. And so I thought it was corporations was going to be the place that I sort of found my path. And it wasn't until years and years later that I decided to become an entrepreneur.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. And I can definitely see that connection, being that I'm a Catholic myself, where you have that conflict between wealth and religion and all that, good stuff. It's implanted somewhere. But I think that's where, when you say, okay, I can do this, but also do good. And if this platform has more, and there's more activist people with good intentions, redeploying that source, that's really, I think, what the world needs. Because if the largest quantity of source of goods and wealth, it's in the hands of people that don't have that instilled in them, and that they don't care about what happens to the others, we are in deep trouble, which is not too far off where we are a little bit when you think about the wealth accumulated in a few percentage of global population. But that's a whole different discussion.
No, it is and it isn't. Look, I'm gonna agree with you, but take a little different tact, if I may,
Mhm.
which is
Absolutely.
I think for what I found myself, and now after working with, investing behind 100 entrepreneurs plus, meeting with thousands of them, and across the board, meeting with so many other people, I think we are all heavily conditioned by our upbringing and the situation around us, and that the single greatest challenge any human has is to break free.
Hmm.
And that's why I wrote this book, is to my personal journey. And ironically, in some ways for me, that is from my father's view of what is a good life. And so I had this drive towards business and creativity, and we'll get into that later, kind of where that led me. But I also had these beliefs that I inherited, but weren't mine. I didn't come to them on my own until later, until later. And so my one of my big conflicts is I was diving into the business world but felt guilty about it the entire time.
Hmm.
And that just doesn't serve anyone, right?
Hmm.
And so I see these conflicts on both, and if you want to get political, on both sides of the political spectrum, the way the
Hmm.
world should be. Well, you know
Hmm.
what? I'm done with thinking about the way the world should be. I'm
Hmm.
I'm I want to live in the here and now. And the here and now, and one of the things I love about your podcast is it's the human connection, right? In these crazy times that I think can be a more rich and fulfilling way to live, and also inevitably lead to at least some awareness of your effect on the world around us, right?
Hmm.
But also, allow and contribute to creating the conditions where each of us get to live our lives, truly, truly our lives, not our fathers, not our grandparents, not Sicily's, not Venezuela's, right?
Mhm.
And I'll tell you a story, one of my favorite stories I love in all my kind of reading and research in the last 10 years and prep for this book in many ways. There's this amazing culture anthropologist named Angeles Arias. And this story, she identifies a story that comes up in multiple cultures. I've heard this in the Jewish tradition and many other traditions as well. But it goes something like this. There's a village with a elderly woman who is the wisest and most respected person in the village, and her name is Zuza. And Zuza goes off to the mountains to commune with the gods before she dies. She knows she's going to die soon. And she comes back to the village distraught, really upset and scared and angry. And they say to her, but Susan, you're our wisest and most respected elder. What could the gods have told you that made you so distraught? And she said, they told me the one question they're going to ask me when I die. And they said, what's that question?
Mhm.
And the question was, Zuza, why weren't you Zuza?
Mhm. Oh, wow.
That's it. And so that to me is the mission I'm on now.
Mm.
Mark, why weren't you Mark? I can look at my background and tell you a story about how all this made sense, but I can also look back and see how much of my life I was living somebody else's definition of success, not
Mhm.
my own.
Mhm.
And so that's why I wrote this book. And what I'm promoting now is like the hard work of seeing how we're trapped and
Mhm.
breaking free of that. I think that is the most beautiful thing we can do in this life is ourselves and encourage those around us to find our zones of genius,
Mm.
commit to what we're doing, go all in on that to bring our creative genius to the world. And that collectively is going to solve problems. Right? I loved your backstory on, deciding to do this podcast, knowing that who knows what's going to happen, right? But
Yeah.
that's the kind of commitment I think is beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, trying to create ripple effects. I'm like you, very intentional. As it's we all talk about the world, the others. It's like no, no. What are you doing? You, not everybody else. You. And so this is in my way to contribute to create awareness, and at least I can do that. And then you keep, but the truth is that the society and the others and the definition of success by others affects you, right? So I was going to ask
Absolutely.
something, and I'll put this podcast. I don't monetize my podcast, and I don't know how many times people have asked me or told me I'm crazy. You do it just because, and then they plant these things in you, and it's like, but I say no because there's this inner voice. So my question to you was going to be, even if you maybe were leaving the framework of success of others, was there an inner knowing that you could identify that guide you to do things the way you did it? Or how much do you think there's that inner self that actually knows who Mark is and is trying to take you there? Or it was just I always very curious about that. It's like,
Yeah.
you sold your company to the Coca-Cola. I mean, how many people can say that?
Yeah.
Not many. That's the ultimate, uh, you know, shiny object to say I'm successful by society
Right.
standards, right?
Right.
But then, of course, you're sharing that in the search, you maybe didn't feel that was success to you. But
Yeah, it's
still,
a
if
great
it
question.
wasn't that, yeah, if it
Yeah.
wasn't that, maybe there wasn't this other thing that you're doing now. So I'm always interested in those serendipity events.
Yeah, so many great questions embedded in that. I'd say the one I'll start with this. Yes, there's an inner voice. I believe we all have it. I know I have mine. And this is where I think part of this comes with age, but I've certainly come to see, and I recommend there's a time and place, and this is true in life and business. There's a time and place for here's the strategy, right? For life or business. These goals, these objectives, follow through, organize them, prioritize them, etc. Right? That works. It's beautiful. and there's a lot one can get done and accomplish in that. At the same time, one of the things I tell companies is, and entrepreneurs, half of strategy is what you don't do. So the ability to say no and the ability and to be clear where you don't go. And there's also a third vector. There's sort of what you do, what you don't do, and then there's what emerges. And that's to me where the magic is. That's to me where the calling can come. And that's about listening more than speaking. It's
Mm,
about quiet more than noise. It's about inaction more than action. And
mm,
so, and this is something I have done for years, is take time to think, take time to meditate, take time to write, to journal. And there's something beautiful, and in fact, you're helping me see this. When I link back to my childhood, man, I loved being alone time. I would ride around on my skateboard, making up my own language and
mm,
singing songs that
mm.
who knows where they came from, right? And so, even though I did choose to go into the business world, which fulfilled certain parts of me, I took time for creativity aside from that. And what was interesting is taking that time, for example, during my corporate job, I would take thought time, 2 to 3 hours a week, absolute blocked off, unaccessible, and no electronics. And
Mm.
so one could say, well, it's easy for you to do now. I was doing this in my first corporate job, right? I just would carve out, might be late afternoon. I could find time from 4 onwards or something. And it wasn't non-business time, right? I would spend time just thinking and reflecting on the business. What's going on? It's the proverbial thinking you're in the business, but can you think about the business, right? And
Mhm.
so the same with a life, right? I would spend time allowing some space, creating some space to see what emerges. Because to your point on the voice, my experience, and this has been written in countless spiritualities, that voice is quiet, right?
Mhm.
It wants to be heard, but it's not going to scream. It's not going to scream.
I love that. I love that. That's quotable. He wants to be heard, but he's not going to scream. So
And
beautifully
so
put.
my part of my journey recently has been allowing, I love this quote. I have this quote I put up on my wall. What wants to come through me now?
Mm,
What wants to emerge? Right? Because sometimes you're pushing, 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 but can you understand? Like, look, one of my favorite sort of models of efficiency in life is the lion, right?
mm.
We went to did a safari some years ago. You can see the videos of them. They lounge, what, 23 hours a day, right? Lounge, relax, play, sleep, roll over.
Mhm.
When it's time to hunt, they hunt. And they hunt by watching, observing, selectively leading in. What if we lived our lives that way, both in business and in life, right? Let it watch the flow of energy, watch the flow of the river, watch the flow of a marketplace, watch the flow of a relationship, and choose the time to go in, right? That to me is a different level of sort of freedom. And frankly, it's delivering for me a different level of results as well.
That's fascinating. Would you say that you were able to watch that flow when you created Zico? Like you identified a product that obviously needed to be brought to the marketplace, and and you did, and maybe that's why, maybe inherently you were watching those flows and say, okay, there's something there that I can bring, that can emerge through me, that yes, then eventually deliver a very successful company. But or how was that? Because I'm sure I have
Yeah.
also entrepreneurs in the audience that say, I have an idea, but I never know, like, is it going to make it? Did you know that your idea was going to make it? Or share a little bit about that process, please.
Sure. I think the simple answer is I was aware enough to know that I didn't know, right? There's no way I knew. But I knew that going into it. I think really what this started with, interestingly for me, was I had a great corporate job. So I was living in El Salvador, running businesses, including in Venezuela. I was responsible for a
Uh,
business in Venezuela, so I went there
oh,
regularly. I
oh,
had
wow.
a great, path to probably reach the C-suite of this multi-billion-dollar global corporation. And this is where that voice came in for me. There
Mm-hmm.
was something in me that just said, is this my life? Is it the life I want? And is it my life? Like, is that my path? And I think even at that age, and more so now, I simultaneously take sort of action and surrender. Like, how can I be active, but how can I also allow to the path to become clear, right? And so I remember, meeting my boss and my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss and thinking, God, is that the life I want? My daughters were born then, and I was trying to imagine them seeing me as this corporate executive. And I also looked back on my past and my family. Thought, is that really my destiny? And is it what I want? And I concluded no. But that brought up a lot of fear in me. Like, you'll appreciate this. What I thought is, oh man, if I leave this, the job, the only job, like these are, I call these
Mm-hmm.
now in my book and talk to people about them, limiting beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
See them. What am I thinking? Write it down. Then ask yourself, is it true? Am I certain? So the limiting belief I had back then was, ah, if I leave my corporate job, this corporation, the only job I'll be able to get is running some business in Latin America. And that means I live in Miami and travel 150 days a year. I don't want that life. Therefore, I'm trapped.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Now,
yes, yes.
it's amazing how even me, with all my experience and all my travels, and everything I had, I still have limiting beliefs, and I certainly had them then, right? Now I have a better technique of how to deal with them. But interestingly, therefore, the conclusion I reached is maybe I need to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
And that question, that fear in a way motivated me. And so I started brainstorming ideas. What would I do? And fortunately, one of the things I did out of the gate, I started brainstorming ideas. But then I stepped back and said, okay, let me think about some criteria, you know,
Mm-hmm.
versus just the ideas. What will I measure the ideas against? And that was so powerful, where I started to say, okay, I do want to have the lifestyle I want, right? What does that mean? What do I want to be associated with? What do I value? I value active, super active. I value health and wellness. I love Latin America. I want to stay tied to Latin America. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to live and work in cool, interesting cities with cool, interesting people. So I had personal values right along with the business values of big market, high margins, potential to exit, et cetera. And so that sort of criteria then led me to, when I was evaluating ideas, and I had a ton of them, coconut water just kept rising to the top as a potential opportunity.
Well, fascinating. I really appreciate the fact that you kind of express about the flow and let it flow, but there still was strategy and technique into that whole process, which I think it's maybe where a lot of people fail. Like they leave it serendipity, like it's going to happen. No, I mean, it will happen if it's meant to be, but you have to put some thought and some
That's right.
really that the follow the why. I call it follow the why until you cannot ask anymore why because you're gonna get to the truth.
Look, you hit on something to me, Leticia, that's so foundational. And someone on this, one of your listeners is going to correct me on this, but I'm going to take a leap of faith here. If I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I, read up on sort of Zen Buddhism, but there's this concept of the way. But
Hmm.
my understanding, if I recalled correctly, was really it's not so much the way, but it's not that extreme and it's not that extreme. You
Hmm.
don't have to, it's not eating, engorging yourself, nor is it starvation, right? And it creates a
Hmm.
really wide path in between. Entrepreneurship's the same way. I run into people that just say, there's a school of thought, the secret, just believe,
Hmm.
you just have to, it's going to happen, right? If you believe and work hard, it's going to happen. On the other extreme is this ridiculous planning that is, so obsessive on every detail that has, but underneath it has no link to a belief or a, reality. Neither of those work in my experience. And
Hmm.
actually, as part of writing this book, I went pretty deep in the neuroscience, and there's actually a neuroscience of manifestation that's very clear. You big goals, when they are aligned emotionally with us,
Hmm.
neuroscience calls that resonance. And I would say you're aligned between your head, your heart, and your gut. What you're
Hmm.
going for both has meaning to you, it's emotionally charged, and it makes sense in your gut. Like, yeah, I can see this happening. So what that means is if it's, oh, I'm going to go build a $1 billion brand in 2 years in a category I've never been in before, your system is out of whack. Like, I'm
Hmm.
sorry, you can believe all you want. It's got to be
Hmm.
aligned in reality.
Hmm.
And then the other steps, and I actually have written out sort of developed a 10-step manifestation hack that I like. One of them is also you got to take action, right? Like to
Hmm.
have the belief without a clear plan, an actual plan. And another part is you gotta pivot, you gotta adapt. That's seeing what's happening around you, right? So it takes all of those. And the reality is that, yeah, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are in the pure belief, it's the secret. I can get magic parking spaces, right? And there's other ones that have no connection with their body or spirit at all. They're all in their head that I've seen, build incredible businesses and then become miserable around it, right? And so I
Hmm.
think there's a wide and healthy path in between the two.
Mm. Well, I think you're giving a lot of my audience, me included, alibi to get the an entrepreneur's guide to freedom. That's where you have all these that you're sharing, right? The 10-step guide to hack to manifestation and
Yes, some of it. I kept the book short and sweet. It's an easy read.
good.
It's designed to be able to read on a plane. There's only probably a third of all the material I have on my website, markrampolla.co, which has a lot more, but the book is a great introduction for entrepreneurs at any stage, whether they're about to start or, along the way, or they've sold. And this I find all the time, and I experience this myself, sold the business, made a ton of money, but I and many others got to a place where it's like, but am I really free? Like, what was
Mm,
I? I'm still
mm,
trapped by all the same limiting beliefs and all the same stories I
mm,
told myself and this crazy drive I have for more. How can I really get to know and accept myself and plan my life forward from here?
mm. So interesting you mentioned that. It's almost like I don't know how many you're probably gonna be 300 and some episode, and that's a common thread of the uber successful that now they say I had everything. But then I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't in alignment. I had to change. I mean, Melissa Bernstein, founder of the famous toy empire, Melissa and
Mm.
Dog, she said, I had everything, the perfect life. And then I was depressed. I wasn't happy. And so for others listening to this, it's like, it must not be only about success. It must be also about, and that's what I love about the premise of your book, freedom, because usually we use it intertwined, but they are really not that intertwinable.
Very different. And the one thing I'd add too is success is in the hands of the succeeder, right? How do you define that? And we may have very different definitions of that, right? And so that's what I help entrepreneurs or really anyone go through is know yourself, understand how you might have adopted views of success from other people, define your own, right? Define
Mhm.
your own and go for that. And then when it happens that inevitably you're still going to wonder, oh, is that enough? Do I want more? No
Mm.
problem. I have a bunch of tools and techniques to deal with that. Because one of the things I realized is, there's a simple adage to be successful in business takes mindset, skill set, and tool sets, right? Mindset, everybody thinks they understand. And then the skill set is specific to your industry, right? Tech, consumer, coaching, whatever it is. And then there's the tools, right? The specific objectives, OKR framework, technology, whatever it is. What I think most people forget is we talk about mindset without understanding mindset takes skill and tools.
Mm.
And that's
Mm.
what I'm teaching is what,
Mm.
frankly, we should have all had in psychology in grade school,
Mm.
right? Understand your emotions, know yourself, create the tools and the skills to be able to manage your life. So that's really what this book is about. It's about the tools and the skills that create the mindset that then allow you to go after the success that you want with one fun little twist on it, non-attachment to the outcome. Because the
Mm.
beauty of that is some people might hear that and say, well, what do you mean? I want to make $10 million, dollars, right? $50 million, dollars, $1 million. Dollars. I need to be attached to that, don't I? I love to ask people, well, are you sure? What if that attachment is holding you back from going from 1 million to 3 million? What if, when you really define it, it's not the money, it's the time with people, it's the travel, it's the lifestyle you can create. What if you could create that lifestyle with less money and get it sooner? Would you be open to that? Right?
Mm.
More of these possibilities. Have fun with them. We get so attached to a dollar amount, an FU number, people will say it, right? Sell
Mhm.
the business, never sell the business, take over the family business, be this in a corporation. Wonderful. All that's great. Can you hold it a little lightly, get curious, learn about yourself, and take a fresh approach?
Wow, thank you for that. I think that's very useful for anybody listening, including me, in terms of defining what needs to be done and how the mindset it's its own ecosystem. And I think that's really the holy grail. As I call it, it's just once we understand that that's a whole universe that we need to work on. We need to work on exactly how we go to the gym, how we stay, in shape. It's mindset and controlling and guiding and being intentional about it. So I think you're
Absolutely.
definitely onto something. And I know you're a busy man, so I don't want to keep talking forever and make you miss meetings and other important stuff. And you've been very, very generous with your time. There is one thing when people listen to you and I listen and say, oh yeah, well, but he has a successful company. He's easy
Right.
for you. Well, in 2025, as I share, you were presented with well, this year with a very difficult experience, which is losing your home to the Pacific Palisades fires. And probably you say, I never thought. And then we
Yeah.
had other people, unfortunately, that I know
Mm.
affected by the same thing. And this is losing your home is, to me, is like the most deep part of yourself, right? So had you not created this mindset, I don't think you would be talking to us the way you're talking today, because
I
you
think that's right.
everybody that goes through that would be depressed, would be victimized, would be some. What can you share of that painful experience of having to go through that?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Oh boy. So look, I think what I'll share is this that, you know, um, it wasn't easy. I certainly had my ups and downs. I had my share of anger. I had my share of sadness. I read up on and became very familiar with the seven, I believe it's now 8 stages of grief and what I went through. I also know myself. I'm great in a crisis. And so I kick into gear and I get things done. But I also know that that can pay a price where later I don't take care of myself, my physical or mental health, and it I run into trouble somewhere later, right? So what I feel so fortunate about is I'd done all this work. The book was almost done, and it was beautiful for me to sort of eat my own cooking, right? And see how I could apply this, which I really did. And it started with things like, look, I'm very sensitive to so many friends and families I know that lost their homes. Everybody's got a different approach. My approach was to first of all, feel all the feelings, right? I think men in particular, particularly businessmen, were sort of trained, well, there's no place for emotions, right? And we need to be strong. Well, okay, but what happens when you're not? Because we're human, right? So I've learned, feel all the feelings. They're just feelings. They're just energy moving through the body. So I've literally taught myself how to feel again, right? And it starts with the hardest emotions are the quote unquote hard ones, right? Sadness. So what does that feel like? What does that? I've got a sad sound track I listen to sort of prompt that feeling. I cried, I journaled, I expressed, I got angry, I screamed. I learned to feel all the feelings and let them be, right? Let them move through me. And when it happens again, you feel them again. The second thing was this powerful question: what if this isn't happening to me, but it's happening for me? How could this be happening for me? Now, one could take that to an extreme. Well, Mark, you didn't, it's fire, it's natural disaster. All right, but look, to your point you mentioned earlier, we create our own universe, right? We tell ourselves whatever story. We are meaning-making machines. I chose to at least allow the possibility. What if this is one of the best things that's ever happened to me? How might that be true? And just the question has been so liberating. Every once in a while, at least, a couple times a week now, it started many times a day, then it was less, now it's less frequently, at least a couple times a week, something comes up. Oh, that my bike. Oh, my favorite speakers. I love those speakers. Oh, that artwork, right? Like it happens all the time. Feel the feelings. Tell myself what story am I telling myself? So I have these tools that I use in the book. What if this is happening for me? What if this is happening for me? And so I can't tell you how yet. I can't tell you how yet. I live in a very modest place, but still, California. I have a beautiful life. But am I going to rebuild? I don't know. I'm also giving myself time. I committed to myself, I will make no major decision for at least a year. An emotionally traumatic experience is a terrible time to make a decision. Same in
Yes.
business, right? You got to react, you got to move. Really? Why don't you just take a little break? Take a little break, right? So this has been a liberating process for me. The beauty now is, sure, I lost a lot of things, and a lot of them had emotional meaning. Sure, I'm not as settled as I'd like to be, and I thought this was going to be my forever house. But the benefits are, I feel like I'm 25. Like I don't have much, kind of build back little by little. I've got, you know, plants, I got artwork I got from a friend and and I'm rebuilding little by little. And I'm trying to be very conscious and intentional and frankly slow in some ways. What life do I want? But I did recommit to my work. So I've doubled down on my investment firm, GroundForce Capital, doubled down on the companies we work with, and doubled down on getting this book out and published and out. So, I don't know where I'm heading yet, but I love where I've been. I've had sadness, I've had ups and downs. That's just part of life. But I feel more free than I ever have in my life. And share one other thing. 10 years ago, one of my best solutions, one of my
Uh-huh.
kind of coping mechanisms would have been the drink, right? Would have been the party, would have been to celebrate, who knows what, right? I now know, okay, that just doesn't serve me, you know?
Mhm.
It doesn't serve me. I work out, I meditate, I do take care of myself physically. I've got these ridiculously disciplined routines that
Mhm.
ultimately help me feel more free, right?
Mm.
It may appear that, oh, well, how free are you if you get up at 5 in the morning and don't drink and these things? Oh, actually, that's part of my catchphrase for that is freedom takes discipline.
That's beautiful. And knowing what is it that works for you and that what gives you that
Yeah.
energy and what, perfect opportunity to ask my last question, and is what makes you tick. So it sounds like that makes you tick. Anything else that we haven't
Yeah.
discussed
I'd
that
leave you with one thing. What makes me tick is finding and and focusing on my full potential and self-realization and creating the conditions, helping to create the conditions where others can do the same.
Mm,
Realize their full potential, realize their full life, live their life, their one unique life, bring their unique gifts to this time and place in this world. That's what we need. That's why I believe we're here. And that's what makes me tick.
beautiful. Well, I am a new fan, so I'm gonna accept that I'm gonna come clean. What a beautiful chat. I really appreciate you being on here and sharing, and so much wisdom. So, I mean, I know because I can tell that yes, it's been an interesting journey, but it sounds like you're very aware, self-aware of everything happens for a reason, and I think that we're going to see a lot more books out of you and a lot more speaking engagements because you do have an ability to inspire. So thank you so much, Mark,
You're
for
welcome. I
having said
appreciate
yes to
that.
Back to Basics.
Okay. Cuídate.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.